I watched my stepfather's face drain of color as my lawyer slid the trust fund documents across the mahogany table. Just 3 weeks earlier, this same man had told my mother I wasn't his problem when I needed life-saving spinal surgery. Now, staring at the $2.3 million inheritance from my deceased father, Brad's hands were literally shaking as he realized what he'd lost forever. My name is Maya Rodriguez, and at 19, I thought I had my life figured out. Community college psychology major, part-time bookstore employee, dreaming of transferring to Arizona State University. Living in suburban Phoenix with my mom, Carmen, and my stepfather, Brad, felt like walking on eggshells most days, but I'd gotten used to it. Brad married my mother 2 years after my real father died when I was 12. He treated our house like his personal kingdom, and me like an unwelcome tenant who'd overstayed her welcome. The man worked as a middle management insurance adjuster, which somehow made him think he was qualified to judge everyone else's life choices, especially mine. Every morning, I'd see my father's photo on my nightstand and remember what unconditional love actually felt like. Brad's discomfort with that picture was obvious. He'd glance at it, purse his lips, and find something else to criticize about my room. Maya, your books are stacked wrong, or Maya, that lamp uses too much electricity. Never anything about the photo directly, but the message was crystal clear. My mother tried to bridge the gap between us. Poor Carmen was constantly playing referee in a game where one player, me, didn't even want to be on the field. She'd suggest family dinners, movie nights, weekend trips. Brad would participate with the enthusiasm of someone getting a root canal. Then there was the money situation. Brad watched every penny that went toward my expenses, like a hawk monitoring its prey. School supplies, gas money, even my work uniform from the bookstore. Everything required a discussion about fiscal responsibility and learning the value of money. Meanwhile, he'd drop $60 on craft beer every weekend without blinking. The weird part is, I actually liked my life despite him. My job at Morrison's Books gave me access to psychology textbooks I couldn't afford, and my coworkers were more supportive than my stepfather had ever been. College was challenging, but exciting. I was building something for myself, slowly but surely. Tuesday night changed everything. I was driving home from my evening shift, thinking about an upcoming exam on developmental psychology. The intersection at 5th Street and McDowell was always busy, but I had the green light. Traffic was moving normally. Then suddenly, the world exploded into metal and glass. A drunk driver had run the red light going 50 miles per hour. His pickup truck slammed into the passenger side of my Honda Civic like a freight train. The impact sent my car spinning across the intersection. Finally, stopping when it hit a concrete barrier. The sound was indescribable, a combination of crushing metal, shattering glass, and something inside me that felt like it was breaking too. Emergency responders arrived within minutes. I remember lying there, unable to feel my legs, watching the paramedics work with professional urgency. One of them kept asking if I could move my toes. I kept trying to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The fear in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. At Phoenix General Hospital, Dr. Martinez delivered the news that would split my life into before and after. 2 vertebrae in my lower spine were compressed. Without surgery within 72 hours, I'd likely face permanent paralysis from the waist down. The operation would cost $150,000. Our insurance would cover 60%. That left us responsible for $60,000 we didn't have. My mother immediately called Brad from my hospital room, putting the phone on speaker because her hands were shaking too badly to hold it steady. She explained the situation through tears, begging him to consider a second mortgage or a loan against his retirement fund. His response still echoes in my memory. "She's not my problem, Carmen. She's got a father. Let him pay for it." When my mother reminded him that my father was dead, Brad's voice turned ice cold. Then maybe she should have thought about that before getting into accidents. But what happened next would reveal something about my father that none of us saw coming. With less than 48 hours before potential paralysis became permanent, my mother transformed into someone I barely recognized. Carmen, who usually needed 10 minutes to decide what cereal to buy, suddenly became a woman on a mission. She was making calls at 6 in the morning, creating GoFundMe pages, and researching second mortgages online until 2 a.m. I watched her from my hospital bed, doped up on pain medication, but still aware enough to see the desperation in her eyes. She'd hung up the phone with Brad the night before and hadn't spoken his name since. Smart woman, honestly. Her first call went to my Aunt Rosa in Tucson. Rosa had always been the family success story. Owned a small restaurant, drove a decent car, seemed financially stable. The conversation lasted maybe 3 minutes. Rosa could contribute $500. Every bit helped, but we needed $60,000. Then came the parade of relatives. Uncle Miguel in California, $300. Cousin Sophia in Denver, $200. My mother's childhood friend Janet, $150. Each conversation started with hope and ended with my mother saying, "Every little bit helps. Thank you so much." The GoFundMe page gained traction faster than we expected. My bookstore coworkers shared it. Our church congregation spread the word. Even some of my community college professors donated. But crowdfunding for medical emergencies is brutal mathematics. Small donations from kind people add up slowly when you're racing against time. Meanwhile, Brad continued his normal routine like nothing was happening. He went to work, came home, watched his evening news, cracked open his craft beer. When neighbors asked about me, he'd shrug and say, "Carmen's handling it," as if I was a broken appliance instead of his stepdaughter fighting for the ability to walk. The weird part? His indifference almost felt like a relief. At least now I knew exactly where I stood. By Wednesday afternoon, we'd raised $18,000. Incredible generosity from people who barely knew me, but still 42,000 short. Dr. Martinez stopped by to check my reflexes and deliver an update that made my stomach drop. The swelling around my spinal cord was increasing. We had maybe 36 hours left. My mother looked like she'd aged 5 years and 2 days. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, surviving on hospital coffee and determination. She was researching bankruptcy lawyers between phone calls to potential donors. That's when I remembered something my father used to say. Miguel Rodriguez wasn't much for grand speeches, but he had this phrase he'd repeat whenever money got tight. "Mija, I'm making sure your future is secured. You just focus on being a kid." I mentioned this to my mother during one of her brief breaks from fundraising. She got this strange look on her face, like someone trying to remember a dream. "Your father did say something about securing your future. Right before he died, he met with some lawyer about paperwork. The lawyer's name was Eleanor Patterson. My mother found her business card in an old jewelry box, tucked behind my father's watch. Patterson, Williams & Associates, Estate Planning and Trust Management. The card was 7 years old, but the phone number still worked. Eleanor Patterson remembered my father immediately. Miguel Rodriguez, lovely man, very concerned about his daughter's future. Let me pull his file. What happened next still gives me chills. Patterson had discovered something during her file review that made her voice change completely. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need you and Maya to come to my office immediately. There's been a significant oversight in your husband's estate." My mother tried to explain that I was hospitalized and we were dealing with a medical crisis. Patterson's response was swift. "Trust me, this will resolve your medical crisis. How quickly can you get here?" Within 2 hours, Eleanor Patterson was sitting beside my hospital bed with a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. Her expression was part excitement, part professional embarrassment. "Maya, your father established a trust fund for you 7 years ago. Due to a filing error in our office, the documentation was misfiled after his death." She opened the folder like she was revealing state secrets. "The trust contains $2.3 million. My mother fainted. Actually fainted right there in the plastic hospital chair. The nurses had to bring her orange juice and check her blood pressure. I thought I was hallucinating from the pain medication. But Eleanor Patterson wasn't finished. "The trust becomes accessible when you turn 18. Since you're 19, the funds are immediately available. I can have the paperwork processed within hours." My father, it turned out, had been quietly brilliant with money. He'd invested in technology stocks during the early 2000s, right before the big boom. Apple, Google, Amazon, companies that seemed risky then but became gold mines. His life insurance policy, combined with his investment portfolio, had grown substantially over 7 years. The surgery was approved that afternoon. Dr. Martinez performed the operation Thursday morning, and by Friday I was wiggling my toes and planning my revenge against Brad. Well, not revenge exactly, more like justice with a side of poetic irony. Eleanor Patterson had also brought my father's letter, sealed with the trust documents. His handwriting was exactly as I remembered, careful, deliberate, loving. He wrote about hoping I'd use the money for education, for independence, for building a life where I'd never have to depend on anyone who didn't truly care about me. Reading those words while lying in a hospital bed, knowing my stepfather had abandoned me when I needed him most, felt like receiving a message from beyond the grave. My father had somehow predicted that I might need protection from people who claimed to be family, but weren't really family. The news about my inheritance spread through our neighborhood faster than a phoenix wildfire. Carmen couldn't keep quiet about it. She was too relieved, too grateful, too amazed by this miracle that had saved her daughter's future. And Brad? Brad's transformation was more dramatic than a werewolf movie. Suddenly, the man who couldn't be bothered to visit me in the hospital was bringing flowers. The same guy who called me not his problem was researching wheelchair-accessible vehicles in case I needed them. He started talking about family vacations, college funds, and even mentioned wanting to officially adopt me. The irony was almost funny. Almost, but I was learning something important about money and human nature. People reveal their true character when they think you have something they want. And what they'd revealed when they thought you had nothing? That's the truth you should never forget. Eleanor Patterson was helping me understand exactly how much power I now held, and more importantly, how to protect it from people with suddenly renewed family feelings. 2 weeks into my recovery, Brad had transformed into a completely different person. The same man who wouldn't lift a finger when I was facing paralysis was suddenly acting like Father of the Year. He'd arrive at physical therapy with protein shakes he'd researched. Online, protein shakes. This guy who used to complain when I left a glass in the sink was now reading articles about spinal recovery nutrition. The performance was almost impressive in its shamelessness. During one particularly awkward family dinner, Brad spread real estate listings across the table like he was dealing cards. Maya, sweetheart, I've been thinking we should buy a bigger house, something with a nice office where you can study, maybe a pool for your physical therapy. His eyes lit up with fake enthusiasm. We could get one of those fancy mortgages where the payments are low because, well, we have the trust fund as collateral. My mother was eating this up. Carmen hadn't seen Brad show interest in family activities for years. She kept smiling at me across the table, probably thinking her prayers had finally been answered. Poor woman had no idea she was watching a masterclass in manipulation. But I was learning something fascinating about human nature. Money doesn't change people, it reveals who they always were. Brad hadn't become greedy overnight. He'd always been calculating, always been selfish. Now, he just thought he had a reason to show it. The breaking point came when he suggested I should invest in the family by buying him a new car. His Honda Civic, ironic considering mine was totaled, was getting old. If I had reliable transportation, I could take on extra clients, make more money for all of us. The way he said all of us made my skin crawl. Eleanor Patterson had warned me this would happen. Maya, you're about to discover who your real family is versus who just wants access to your resources. It's not always a pleasant education. The weird part is, I started feeling grateful for Brad's earlier cruelty. His abandonment during my medical crisis had shown me exactly who he was when the masks came off. Now I was watching him put the mask back on, and it was fascinating in the most disturbing way possible. 3 weeks after my surgery, I made the phone call that would end this charade forever. Eleanor, I need you to schedule a meeting. Tell Brad and my mother it's about trust fund management and investment strategies. I could hear her smiling through the phone. I think it's time for some financial education. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon at Eleanor's law office. Brad showed up wearing his best suit and carrying a leather portfolio he'd probably bought just for the occasion. He'd printed investment pamphlets, researched financial advisors, and even brought a calculator. The man had done more preparation for this meeting than he'd done for my medical crisis. Eleanor spread the trust fund documents across her mahogany conference table with theatrical precision. Brad leaned forward, his eyes practically sparkling as she explained the fund's total value, growth potential, and accessibility. He was taking notes like a college freshman in his first economics class. Then I cleared my throat. Brad, I want to thank you for something important. When I was lying in that hospital bed, facing the possibility of never walking again, you taught me a valuable lesson about family. His pen stopped moving. You made it crystal clear that I wasn't your problem. You were absolutely right. The color started draining from his face like someone had pulled a plug. I'm not your problem, and you're definitely not mine. What happened next would reshape our family forever, but not in the way Brad had been planning with his investment pamphlets and mortgage calculations. I announced my decisions like I was reading a grocery list, each item carefully planned. I'm transferring to Arizona State University next semester and moving into my own apartment near campus. Brad's portfolio slipped from his hands, papers scattered across Eleanor's polished floor like his dreams of easy money. I'm also buying my mother a small condo in Scottsdale. Carmen, you can leave Brad if you want to, but that choice is entirely yours. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time in weeks they looked like relief instead of stress. Brad finally found his voice. Maya, honey, let's not make any hasty decisions. We're family. We should stick together, pool our resources, make smart investments as a team. The desperation in his voice was almost pathetic. Almost. Brad, we established what kind of team we are 3 weeks ago. You made your position very clear when I needed surgery. I turned to Eleanor. I'm also establishing a scholarship fund in my father's name for students who've lost parents, and I want you to recommend a financial advisor who specializes in protecting assets from family members with sudden renewed interest. His face went from pale to gray. The man who'd spent 2 weeks planning how to spend my money was realizing that his elaborate schemes were worthless. My inheritance was legally mine alone, protected by trusts and legal structures he couldn't touch. Eleanor gathered the scattered papers with professional efficiency. Maya, I'll have all the paperwork ready by Monday. Brad, Carmen, thank you for coming. 6 months later, I was thriving at ASU studying pre-law, with plans to help families navigate estate planning. Funny how life comes full circle. Carmen visits every weekend, having found the courage to file for divorce after 20 years of walking on eggshells. My apartment has my father's photo in the living room now, not hidden on some nightstand. I finally understood what his letter meant about never depending on people who didn't truly care about me. Last week, Brad left a desperate voicemail asking if we could work things out as his divorce proceedings drain his savings. I deleted it halfway through without feeling even a twinge of guilt. Some problems really aren't mine to solve. My father's love had given me something Brad never could. The security to walk away from people who only valued me when I had something they wanted. That's a lesson worth $2.3 million.